I am Maya, 34 years old, and somehow still healing from the wounds my family inflicted. As a senior forensic auditor, I deal in hard facts and undeniable financial truths. But absolutely nothing in my meticulous career prepared me for the ultimate betrayal at my own baby shower. When a pregnant stranger barged into my upscale Buckhead estate claiming my husband was the father of her child, my mother-in-law rushed to comfort the mistress instead of me. They expected a hysterical pregnant woman. They thought I would break down, cry, and walk away from my own home. Instead, I picked up her ultrasound photo and asked a single question that unraveled their entire pathetic scam. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a toxic family who severely underestimated your intelligence and your worth. Growing up in the foster system meant I had to build my own armor early on. I learned to rely on logic rather than emotion. The sound of shattering crystal cut through the soft music of the string quartet. I did not flinch. My brain is hardwired to process anomalies before reacting to them. I simply lowered my expensive mocktail and scanned the sprawling manicured lawn of our beautiful estate. The hired caterers froze mid-pour. The 50 guests dressed in their Sunday-best pastels turned as one collective breathless entity toward the French doors of the patio. There she stood. She could not have been older than 24. Her cheap sequined dress strained against a massive rounded belly. Her heels dug ungracefully into my expensive imported grass. But it was not her atrocious outfit that made the air in the garden evaporate completely. It was the crumpled, glossy ultrasound photo she was waving proudly like a battle flag. "Are you going to hide me forever, Marcus?" Her voice shrieked raw and unpolished, shattering the refined ambiance of my $40,000 baby shower. "I am your real wife, and this baby is the firstborn of this family, not whatever she is cooking up." A collective gasp rippled through the sea of affluent relatives. I slowly turned my calm gaze to Marcus. My handsome, impeccably groomed husband of 7 years was the youngest vice president at his prestigious investment firm. He prided himself on being the absolute pinnacle of success and charm. Right now, he looked like he was about to vomit his catered salmon. "Who are you?" Marcus stammered. His hands raised defensively as he took a step back, positioning himself cleverly behind his mother. "Security. Please get this crazy woman out of here right now." "Do not play dumb with me, honey," the girl screamed, tears streaming down her face as she pushed past a bewildered waiter. "You promised me. You said you were leaving her. You said this big house was going to be ours." She slammed the ultrasound picture down onto the gift table right next to a silver-plated rattle. I expected Marcus to rush forward to shield me, his pregnant wife, from this lunatic. Instead, it was my mother-in-law, Mama Geraldine, who moved first. Geraldine had always looked at me like I was something dirty simply because I grew up in foster care instead of a wealthy, gated community. Geraldine did not slap the girl. She did not call the police. She gasped, stepped forward, and instinctively placed her manicured hand on the protruding belly of the stranger. "Lord have mercy," Geraldine whispered, her eyes wide with a horrific mix of shock and calculation. "Marcus, tell me this is not true. Tell me you did not stray. This poor child is carrying my grandchild." "Mama, I swear to God I do not know her," Marcus pleaded, his voice cracking perfectly on cue. The whispers among the guests grew into a loud, frantic buzz. They whispered that Marcus cheated. They whispered that I was going to miscarry from the sudden stress. I could feel the pitying stares burning into the side of my face. They were waiting for me to break. They were waiting for the angry, emotional, pregnant woman to scream, cry, and throw a glass at her husband. I did not do any of that. Emotion is a liability, while data is power. I placed my mocktail on a passing tray, smoothed down the front of my white silk maternity gown, and walked calmly toward the gift table. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I could feel Liam, my husband's white brother-in-law, watching me with an arrogant smirk. He was practically vibrating with excitement at my impending humiliation. I stopped at the table and picked up the ultrasound photo. "Give that back, because that is my baby." the girl snapped, lunging forward. "Lower your voice," I said. My tone was not loud, but it was absolute. The icy authority in my voice made her freeze immediately. I adjusted my glasses, bringing the glossy paper closer to my face. The string quartet had completely stopped playing. The silence in the garden was absolutely deafening. "Fascinating," I murmured, tracing a finger over the printed text at the top of the medical scan. I looked up at the girl, letting my eyes drag slowly from her cheap extensions down to her scuffed heels. "What did you say your name was again?" "Chloe," she spat, though her confidence wavered slightly under my deadpan stare. "And I am 5 months along with the son of your husband." 5 months, I repeated loudly, ensuring every single guest, especially Mama Geraldine and Liam, could hear me clearly. Conceived naturally, I assume, through passionate nights in a hotel downtown. "Yes." Chloe crossed her arms, jutting her chin out defiantly. "He loves me." I let out a soft, dry chuckle. It was not a hysterical laugh, but the laugh of an auditor who had just found a glaring, stupid math error in a fraudulent ledger. "That is truly a medical miracle, Chloe," I announced, my voice carrying clearly over the manicured lawn. I turned to face my husband, who was now sweating profusely through his custom linen suit. Because exactly 3 years ago, I personally paid the out-of-pocket medical bill for Marcus to have a bilateral vasectomy at the university hospital. The garden erupted in gasps. "A what?" Mama Geraldine shrieked, dropping her hand from the belly of Chloe as if it were on fire. "A vasectomy, Geraldine," I said, maintaining deadly eye contact with Marcus. "His sperm count has been officially 0 for 36 months. The baby I am carrying is the result of 18 months of grueling medical treatments and an anonymous donor which Marcus legally agreed to." "So, Chloe, my question is not whether that child is the son of my husband. My question is exactly how much did Mama Geraldine and Liam pay you to barge in here and perform this pathetic little play today?" The absolute silence that followed my highly specific question was not just quiet. It was a sudden, heavy, suffocating vacuum that immediately sucked the breathable air out of the entire Buckhead estate. Chloe opened and closed her mouth like a dying fish. She looked frantically past me, and her eyes darted straight toward Liam, who was standing aggressively near the melting swan ice sculpture. It was a micro-expression, barely a second of panicked eye contact, but in my line of work, a micro-expression is as good as a signed confession. Liam immediately flushed a very deep, ugly shade of red. He stepped out from the large crowd of fully stunned guests, his expensive loafers crunching aggressively against the patio stones. "Have you completely lost your damn mind, Maya?" he barked loudly, his voice booming with the unearned authority of a man who married into money and thought it made him royalty. He pointed a thick, accusing finger at me. "My mother-in-law is a pillar of the community. She is standing here having a heart attack over the infidelity of her son, and you are accusing her of hiring an actress. You are absolutely psychotic." "Am I, Liam?" I asked, not giving an inch of ground. I did not raise my voice because I did not need to. I just proved this woman is lying about the paternity of her child. Yet instead of questioning the intruder who just ruined a private event, you are instantly attacking me. Why is that? "Because you are disrespecting this family," Liam shouted, taking another step forward, trying to use his height to intimidate me. "Marcus makes a mistake. He brings some gold digger around and suddenly, you are attacking all of us. This is exactly why none of us wanted him to marry some stray from the foster system. You have no class, Maya. None." "Liam, stop." Marcus finally found his voice, stepping between us. But he was not looking at me. He was looking at the crowd of influential guests, bankers, surgeons, and real estate developers who were watching the scene with wide, horrified eyes. The carefully curated image of Marcus as the flawless, successful family man was disintegrating in real time. Marcus turned to me, his eyes wide and shiny, pulling out his best wounded puppy look, the look that used to work on me when we first met. "Maya, baby, please," Marcus begged, reaching out to touch my arm. I took a sharp step back, dodging his hand like it was venomous. I do not know who this woman is, I swear on my life. Maybe she is crazy. Maybe she is trying to extort me. But you cannot accuse my mother and my brother-in-law of something so sick. Please, your hormones are acting up. Let us just go inside. Do not, you dare gaslight me and blame my pregnancy, Marcus. I said, my voice cold enough to freeze the champagne in the glasses. I am perfectly lucid. Mama Geraldine finally recovered from her shock. She pressed a hand to her chest, leaning heavily against a patio chair as if her legs were giving out. "Oh, Lord," she wailed, her voice trembling with theatrical grief. "After everything I have done for you, Maya, after I welcomed you into my home, you accuse me of this. Marcus, I cannot stay here and be spoken to this way by your wife, not in front of our friends. You are right, Mama." Marcus said quickly, seizing the opportunity to escape the glaring eyes of the crowd. He glared at me, a flash of genuine venom breaking through his panicked facade. "You need to calm down, Maya. You are out of control. I am taking my mother and Liam out of here before you embarrass yourself further." He did not wait for my response. Marcus wrapped a protective arm around the shoulders of Mama Geraldine. Liam shot me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred, muttering an insult before turning on his heel. The three of them marched quickly toward the side gate, entirely ignoring the fake pregnant mistress, who was still standing awkwardly by the gift table. Chloe looked around, realizing she had been abandoned by her supposed lover and her secret employers. Without saying a single word, she snatched the fake ultrasound off the table, hiked up her cheap dress, and sprinted across the lawn toward the long driveway, nearly tripping over a black extension cord in her haste. I stood alone in the center of the patio. 50 guests stared at me. The caterers stood frozen. The wreckage of my perfect baby shower was scattered around me like shrapnel. "The party is over," I announced to the crowd, my voice steady, betraying none of the adrenaline surging through my veins. "Thank you all for coming. The valet will bring your cars around." It took less than 15 minutes for the estate to clear out. People offered awkward, hushed apologies as they practically ran for the exits, desperate to escape the blast radius of our family drama. When the heavy oak front door finally clicked shut behind the last guest, the silence of the massive 6-bedroom house crashed down on me. I stood in the foyer, breathing in the scent of expensive lilies and catered truffle oil. Most women in my position would have collapsed on the marble stairs. They would have called their best friend, sobbing uncontrollably. They would have packed a bag and fled. I walked straight into the home office of Marcus. I locked the heavy mahogany door behind me, sat down in his leather ergonomic chair, and flipped open my encrypted work laptop. My hands did not shake as I typed in the passwords. My mind was already compartmentalizing the trauma, filing it away for later. Right now, I needed data. The panic of Liam, the calculated gasp of Mama Geraldine, the desperate staged exit of Marcus. None of it made sense as a simple affair. It was too messy, too public, too orchestrated. I opened our joint bank account portal. The account where we kept our liquid savings, the money earmarked for the nursery of the baby, my upcoming maternity leave, and the property taxes. 2 days ago, the balance had been $252,400. I hit refresh. The screen loaded. The green numbers updated. Available balance $14.32. I stared at the screen, my heart thudding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I clicked into the transaction history. Exactly 15 minutes before Chloe had shattered the glass at the baby shower, an outgoing wire transfer of $252,385 had been initiated from the IP address of Marcus. The destination was an offshore limited liability company registered in Delaware. The fake mistress, the public scene, the accusations of my hormonal instability. It was not an affair, it was a heist. They had staged a catastrophic public meltdown so Marcus could leave the house, play the victim, and drain my assets while I was distracted by the humiliation. They thought because I was pregnant, I would be weak, emotional, and blind to the numbers. They forgot who paid for this house. They forgot who climbed out of the foster system to become a senior auditor at a Fortune 500 company. I did not cry. I smiled. A dark, terrifying smile in the quiet of the office. You want to play with numbers, Marcus? I thought, pulling up the federal tax database. Let us play a new game. I did not sleep a single wink that night. Instead, I drank black coffee and built intricate financial spreadsheets. By the time morning sun began filtering through the curtains of my home office, I had traced the initial trajectory of the missing $250,000. The offshore account was cloaked behind anonymous shell companies, but forensic accounting is essentially digital bloodhounding. Money always leaves a traceable scent. I was just about to run a cross-check on the registered agents when a sharp, aggressive pounding echoed from the heavy mahogany front door. I closed my encrypted laptop, sliding it carefully into my leather briefcase. I walked through the silent, empty mansion. I unlocked the front door, expecting to see Marcus crawling back with some fabricated, pathetic apology. Instead, a bored-looking man in a cheap gray suit shoved a thick manila envelope directly against my chest. "You are served," he mumbled, turning on his heel and walking quickly back to his idling sedan. I opened the envelope right there in the expansive foyer. The document was an emergency restraining order. According to the sworn affidavit of my husband, I had suffered a severe psychotic break threatening his life. It falsely claimed I was a sudden danger to others. The legal order demanded I vacate the marital residence immediately, pending a full psychological evaluation. Before I could even process his blatant perjury, the loud screech of tires pulling into my circular driveway drew my immediate attention. A black luxury vehicle and a white sedan parked aggressively, completely blocking my exit. Liam stepped out of the black vehicle wearing a smug, highly satisfied grin that instantly made my blood boil. Mama Geraldine emerged from the white sedan, adjusting her designer silk scarf, as if she were arriving for a lovely Sunday brunch rather than an eviction. A rough-looking man in a blue work shirt carrying a heavy metal toolbox followed closely behind them. A locksmith. "Well, look who is still here," Liam sneered, marching up the front steps like he owned the entire estate. "The court order specifically said you had to vacate the premises immediately, Maya." I stood firmly, blocking the doorway, my posture perfectly straight. "You are moving incredibly fast," Liam, I observed calmly. "A fake mistress yesterday and a fraudulent restraining order today. You must be absolutely terrified of what I might find if I stay in this house too long." Mama Geraldine pushed past Liam. Her face twisted in a nasty mask of righteous indignation. "Do not you dare speak to my family that way, you ungrateful little stray. Marcus is terrified of you. He is staying at a hotel right now because he truly fears for his life. We are here to secure his property." "Property?" I echoed slowly, raising a single eyebrow. "That is a very interesting choice of words, Geraldine. Considering my name is the only one listed on the property deed." Liam laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Not for long, sweetheart. Marcus is your legal husband and this mansion is a marital asset. You are clearly having a massive mental breakdown. We are simply protecting his half of the equity." "Go ahead and change the locks, buddy," he barked over his shoulder to the bewildered locksmith, who hesitated nervously on the porch. I looked directly at the locksmith, my voice dropping to a conversational and highly reasonable tone. "Sir, if you drill that lock today, you will be actively participating in an illegal eviction. The deed is in my name alone. I paid the $100,000 down payment entirely from my personal savings before we were even married. I have made every single mortgage payment for the last 5 years solely in my name. Marcus has never contributed a single dime to the equity of this entire estate." The locksmith took a slow step backward, lowering his heavy drill. "I do not want any trouble, lady," he mumbled, looking around uncomfortably. Liam grabbed the man roughly by the shoulder, shoving him forward toward the door. "Do your job right now, or I will make sure your company never gets another contract in this city," he threatened viciously. Liam turned back to me, his face mere inches from mine. "You listen to me, you arrogant little orphan. You think you are incredibly smart because you wear nice suits and play with spreadsheets. But you are absolutely nothing. You come from nothing and you will go back to nothing. Marcus is taking half of this house, half of your retirement, and full custody of whatever is growing in your belly. Now get out before I call the local police." I looked deep into his pale, furious eyes and saw the absolute panic hiding just beneath his fake anger. They desperately needed me out of the house. They needed immediate access to the physical files. They needed to control the entire narrative. Fighting them on the porch would accomplish absolutely nothing. It would only give them the dramatic police scene they wanted to justify their fake restraining order. I stepped back smoothly, allowing the heavy mahogany door to swing open. "You can change the locks today, Liam," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "But you cannot change the paper trail. I will be out in exactly 10 minutes." I walked away, leaving them standing awkwardly on the threshold. I did not pack clothes. I packed weapons. I took my encrypted laptop, my backup hard drives, the folders containing our tax returns, and the birth certificate of Marcus. I placed them all into a waterproof duffel bag. As I walked out the front door, Mama Geraldine was already measuring the windows for new drapes. "You will never set foot in this house again, Maya," she declared loudly. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs, gripping the bag. "You are right, Geraldine," I agreed softly. "When I return, this will not be a house anymore. It will be a federal crime scene." I walked down the sweeping brick steps of the Buckhead mansion for what I knew would be the last time in a very long while. The heavy waterproof duffel bag slung over my shoulder contained every piece of ammunition I needed to dismantle their entire fraudulent existence. As I reached my car, I did not look back. I threw the heavy bag onto the passenger seat and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, I could see Liam directing the locksmith to the front door, while Mama Geraldine stood on the pristine lawn with her hands on her hips, acting like the newly crowned queen of a stolen castle. Let them enjoy their imaginary victory today. They had absolutely no idea the level of financial warfare I was about to bring down upon their heads. I drove away from the affluent neighborhood, navigating the winding tree-lined streets of Atlanta. My mind drifted back to the early days of my marriage to Marcus. He had always presented himself as the ultimate provider. When we first met, he wore custom-tailored suits, drove a leased luxury vehicle, and spoke endlessly about building generational wealth. He played the part of the successful financial executive perfectly. But behind closed doors, the reality of our financial dynamic was a completely different story. I was the one who pulled myself out of the foster care system by working 3 jobs to pay for my accounting degree. I was the one who landed a highly coveted position at a top-tier forensic accounting firm. I was the actual breadwinner. Marcus had charm and a prestigious job title, but his actual salary was completely consumed by his massive student loans, his expensive country club memberships, and the constant financial bailouts he provided to his mother and his sister. When it came time to purchase the Buckhead mansion, his credit score was utterly abysmal. I paid the massive down payment entirely from my own hard-earned savings. I signed the mortgage documents alone. Yet Marcus insisted on playing the proud homeowner, hosting lavish parties and accepting the breathless admiration of his peers. I allowed him to maintain that fragile ego, protecting his pride because I loved him. I foolishly thought we were a team building a future together. Instead, I was simply funding his highly curated lifestyle while he secretly plotted with his greedy family to strip me of everything I had built. I pulled into the underground parking garage of a luxury hotel in downtown Atlanta. It was a secure location far away from the prying eyes of my treacherous in-laws. I paid for a suite in advance using a secondary corporate credit card that Marcus did not even know existed. A forensic auditor always maintains a secure contingency fund. I rode the private elevator up to the 20th floor, walked into the spacious suite, and immediately locked the heavy wooden door behind me. I did not bother unpacking my few toiletries. I went straight to the large glass desk near the floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the city skyline. I pulled my encrypted laptop from the duffel bag and plugged it into the wall outlet. I connected to my secure private network, bypassing the hotel internet entirely. The time for feeling sorry for myself had completely passed. I was no longer a discarded pregnant wife. I was a professional investigator sitting in my war room, and I had a massive financial crime to unravel. I opened my digital files and stared at the banking portal screen. The stolen $250,000 was sitting somewhere, and money never simply vanishes into thin air. It leaves a distinct digital footprint, a trail of breadcrumbs that lazy criminals always fail to erase properly. Marcus thought he was a financial genius because he knew how to manage basic investment portfolios, but he had absolutely no concept of deep forensic tracking. I began running the routing numbers of the offshore limited liability company in Delaware where the funds had been wired. It took me less than 3 hours to crack the first layer of their pathetic shell company. The Delaware Corporation was registered to a registered agent service, which was standard practice for hiding assets. But criminals are often incredibly cheap when it comes to the administrative details. They used a discount registered agent service that had experienced a minor data breach 2 years ago. Using public records and a few highly specialized investigative databases, I cross-referenced the billing address used to set up the Delaware company. The address did not trace back to Marcus. It did not trace back to Mama Geraldine. The billing address for the shell company hiding my stolen savings belonged to a commercial real estate firm located right here in downtown Atlanta. The exact same commercial real estate firm where Liam worked as a senior broker. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a low, humorless laugh. Liam was the mastermind. Marcus was too cowardly and frankly too incompetent to orchestrate a rapid asset transfer of this magnitude on his own. Liam, the arrogant white brother-in-law who constantly sneered at my background, had engineered this entire heist. He convinced Marcus to fake the affair, use the fake restraining order, and drain the accounts before I could react. They thought they could use the sudden shock of a pregnant mistress to paralyze me while they robbed me blind. I opened a new spreadsheet and named it the Liam Takedown. I needed to know exactly how deep this rabbit hole went. If Liam was willing to orchestrate a massive wire fraud to steal my savings, he was definitely committing other financial crimes. He was hiding dirty secrets that I would easily expose. I began pulling every single public real estate transaction Liam had touched in the last 5 years. I was going to dissect his entire career piece by piece. My phone buzzed suddenly on the desk, interrupting my intense focus. It was an automated text message from my credit monitoring service. A new hard credit inquiry had just been placed on my Social Security number. I stared at the glowing screen as a cold wave of realization washed over me. The $250,000 was just the beginning of their plan. They were trying to completely destroy my financial identity. I cracked my knuckles and leaned forward, eyes locked on the monitor, ready to completely obliterate them. I cracked my knuckles and leaned forward, my eyes completely locked on the glowing monitor, ready to completely obliterate them. The brand new hard credit inquiry on my Social Security number was from an online lending institution. They were attempting to take out a massive loan in my name. I immediately initiated a credit freeze across all 3 bureaus, blocking any further attempts to access my profile. I filed a fraud alert flagging the specific IP address used for the application. It was the exact IP address from the real estate office of Liam. They were getting extremely sloppy. With my financial perimeter secured, I shifted my focus to the absolute weakest link in their absurd conspiracy. Chloe. The girl was young, inexperienced in corporate fraud, and hired on short notice. Liam was arrogant, but he was incredibly cheap. I knew he would not pay her the full amount in untraceable cash up front. He would leave a digital trail because men like him always underestimate the digital footprint they leave behind. I hacked into the employee reimbursement portal of the real estate firm using an administrative backdoor. I scanned the petty cash requests and expense reports filed by Liam over the last 48 hours. There it was. A vaguely worded expense request for site staging services, authorized for payment to an independent contractor. The routing number attached to the payment matched a standard mobile banking application. I ran a reverse lookup on the account details and had the full legal name, home address, and current cell phone location of Chloe. Her phone pinged a midtown apartment. I closed my laptop and grabbed my keys. I needed physical evidence to supplement the digital paper trail. I drove a rented dark gray sedan from the hotel parking garage, keeping a low profile as I navigated the Atlanta streets. I parked across the street from the Midtown apartment complex and waited patiently. Exactly 2 hours later, the front door of the apartment building swung open. Chloe walked out, but she looked completely different than she had at my baby shower yesterday. She was wearing tight black yoga pants, a cropped hooded sweatshirt, and dark sunglasses. The massive 5-month pregnant belly was still prominently protruding under her clothes, but her posture was entirely wrong for a truly pregnant woman. She moved much too quickly, her balance was entirely too perfect, and she completely lacked the subconscious protective hand placement over her stomach. She climbed into a beat-up silver compact car and pulled out of the parking lot. I slipped the rented sedan into gear and followed her closely, maintaining a safe distance. We drove for about 20 minutes, leaving the upscale Midtown area and entering a commercial district. Chloe pulled into the massive asphalt parking lot of a local public supermarket. Instead of parking near the front entrance, she drove around to the back of the brick building where the large dumpsters and isolated loading docks were located. I parked my car completely out of sight near the edge of the building and quietly slipped out. I pulled out my smartphone, hitting the record button on the high-definition video camera as I crept slowly along the rough brick wall. The loading dock area was completely deserted except for her silver vehicle. Chloe opened her car door and stepped out, looking nervously over her shoulder. She did not see me hidden perfectly behind a large stack of wooden shipping pallets. Through the digital lens of my camera, I watched intently as she reached under her cropped hooded sweatshirt. She unfastened a thick industrial Velcro strap located at her lower back. With a heavy sigh of absolute physical relief, she pulled a massive flesh-colored silicone prosthetic belly out from under her clothing. Her actual stomach was completely flat. There was no baby. There was no miraculous natural conception. It was nothing more than a cheap theatrical prop bought online or stolen directly from a costume shop. Chloe held the heavy silicone bump in her bare hands, looking at it with intense disgust and sheer exhaustion. She walked directly over to the large green industrial dumpster. She tossed the silicone prop right into the trash along with a crumpled paper bag from a fast food restaurant. She dusted off her hands, adjusted her loose sweatshirt, and got back into her silver car, driving away rapidly. I stepped out from behind the wooden pallets, my phone still actively recording every single second of the aftermath. I walked over to the filthy dumpster and peered inside. The silicone belly was resting right on top of a pile of discarded cardboard boxes. I stopped the video recording and instantly saved the file to my highly secure encrypted cloud storage. I reached into my waterproof duffel bag, pulled out a pair of sterile latex gloves, and carefully retrieved the silicone prop. It was heavy, realistic, and incredibly damning. I placed the fake belly into a clear plastic evidence bag I always kept in my professional audit kit. I had the financial records proving Liam stole my money. I had the digital footprint proving Liam paid this young girl. And now I had the physical prop she used to fake a pregnancy and destroy my public reputation. But I needed one more piece to complete the puzzle. I needed to catch them communicating in person. I needed to prove that Marcus and Liam were directly orchestrating her next moves. I got back into my rented sedan and pulled up the real-time location tracking software on my phone. The cell phone of Chloe was currently moving toward a rundown industrial park on the outskirts of the city, a location that made absolutely no sense for a casual afternoon drive. She was going to meet someone to collect the rest of her dirty money. I started the engine and slowly followed her digital tracking signal, ready to capture the final undeniable nail in their collective legal coffin. The digital dot on my phone screen blinked steadily, leading me away from the busy commercial district and deep into an abandoned industrial sector of Atlanta. The landscape shifted rapidly from glossy upscale storefronts to crumbling brick warehouses and overgrown chain-link fences. This was an area long forgotten by city developers. It was the perfect, desolate location for a clandestine payoff. I parked my rented sedan behind a massive rusted shipping container, keeping my headlights completely off. Through the cracked windshield, I watched Chloe pull her silver compact car into the center of the cracked asphalt lot. She killed the engine and waited. The silence of the abandoned yard was heavy and tense. Exactly 12 minutes later, a sleek black luxury SUV rolled into the empty lot. Its dark-tinted windows made it impossible to see the driver, but I recognized the expensive vehicle immediately. It was the exact same SUV that had blocked my driveway earlier that morning. Liam. I rolled down my passenger side window just enough to get a clear, unobstructed view of the impending interaction. I braced my elbows against the center console and zoomed the camera lens of my phone directly onto the scene. My hands remained perfectly steady. The driver's side door of the luxury SUV opened, and Liam stepped out onto the crumbling asphalt. He looked completely out of place in his tailored navy suit and expensive Italian leather shoes, standing amidst the garbage and rusted metal. He buttoned his suit jacket with a look of extreme distaste, wrinkling his nose at the filthy surroundings. Chloe got out of her cheap car and marched right up to him. Even from a distance, I could see the furious defensive posture she took. She crossed her arms tightly over her flat stomach and began speaking rapidly. While I was too far away to hear every single word clearly, the desolate acoustics of the empty industrial park carried the sharp, angry pitch of her voice across the lot. "You said it would be easy," she practically shrieked, her voice echoing off the brick walls. "You said that pregnant bitch would just cry and run away." She analyzed my medical bill in front of everyone, Liam. She knew about the surgery. Liam aggressively closed the distance between them, pointing a stiff, threatening finger directly into her face. "Keep your voice down, you stupid girl," he hissed sharply. His deep voice carried a dangerous edge. "I do not care what happened at the party." The distraction worked perfectly. "We got the money out of the account and we got her out of the house. Your job is done." He reached into the inner pocket of his tailored suit jacket and pulled out a thick, bulging manila envelope. He shoved it roughly into her chest. "Here is the remaining 5,000 in untraceable cash, just like we agreed. Now you take this money and you disappear. If I ever see your face in Buckhead again, or if you ever try to contact Marcus, I will personally ensure you spend the next 10 years in a federal prison for extortion. Do you understand me?" Chloe snatched the envelope, clutching it tightly against her chest. She looked terrified, but the sight of the thick stack of cash quickly subdued her anger. She nodded quickly, backing away from him. "I am leaving," she muttered. "Just make sure your idiot brother-in-law keeps his mouth shut too." Liam let out a cruel, condescending laugh. "Marcus does exactly what I tell him to do. He is too busy playing the victim in his luxury hotel suite right now to worry about you. Get out of here." I kept the high-definition video rolling as Chloe scrambled back into her silver car and sped out of the industrial lot, leaving a massive cloud of dust in her wake. Liam stood alone for a moment. He pulled out his phone, typed a quick text message, smiled a highly satisfied, greedy smile, and climbed back into his luxury SUV. He drove away in the completely opposite direction. I sat alone in the dark rented car, my finger resting on the screen, as the video file saved directly to my encrypted cloud server. The missing pieces of this chaotic puzzle rapidly snapped into perfect alignment inside my mind. I took a deep breath, letting the cold analytical logic wash over me. Liam was the absolute mastermind of this entire operation. Marcus was nothing more than a pathetic, useful pawn. Liam had always been a greedy, predatory real estate broker, masking his financial insecurity with arrogance and racism. He looked down on me because I was a black woman who grew up in the foster system. Yet I made triple his annual salary and actually owned the mansion his wife desperately coveted. Liam needed money badly. You do not orchestrate a desperate, sloppy wire fraud of $250,000 unless you are in massive, insurmountable debt. Marcus had authorized access to my joint bank account, but Marcus lacked the ruthless criminal intelligence to execute this heist alone. Liam had recognized the weakness in Marcus. Marcus was a narcissist who hated feeling emasculated by a significantly more successful wife. Liam had easily manipulated that fragile ego. Liam convinced Marcus to drain our joint savings and sign the fraudulent eviction papers. Liam hired Chloe to stage the explosive public scene at the baby shower. The fake mistress was never about an affair. It was a highly calculated distraction to create immediate chaos. The absolute goal was to force me out of the house in a state of emotional shock so I could not access my physical financial records before the massive wire transfer fully cleared. But Liam made one massive catastrophic miscalculation. He severely underestimated my resilience. He assumed I would act like a stereotypical emotional victim. He had no idea I possessed the specialized forensic skills to dismantle his entire scheme in less than 24 hours. They thought they had won. They thought the money was safely hidden in the Delaware Shell Company, managed secretly by Liam. They thought the fake restraining order would keep me locked out of my own life while they filed for a rapid divorce and split the stolen cash. I put my car in gear and slowly drove out of the industrial park. The digital evidence I had just gathered was phenomenal, but I needed to understand exactly why Liam was so desperate for cash right now. And I needed to see exactly how deep Marcus had buried himself in this criminal conspiracy. Marcus was the vice president at a prestigious investment firm. If he was authorizing fraudulent wire transfers and committing perjury on sworn legal documents, he was risking his entire professional license and facing severe federal prison time. As I navigated the rented sedan onto the busy highway, heading toward the towering skyscrapers of downtown Atlanta, I allowed myself a brief moment to grieve the marriage I thought I had. For 7 years, I had provided Marcus with a life of absolute luxury and unwavering support. I had paid for his expensive suits, I had funded our lavish vacations, and I had built a secure future for the child currently growing in my womb. In return, he had handed the keys to our financial kingdom over to his racist, manipulative brother-in-law. The betrayal was incredibly deep, but the cold fury replacing my sadness was infinitely stronger. Marcus had chosen his toxic family over his pregnant wife. He had chosen greed over loyalty. He was about to learn the most painful lesson of his entire life. When you corner a forensic auditor, you do not just face a bitter ex-wife. You face a methodical, relentless investigator who will not stop until every single stolen dollar is recovered and every single lie is exposed to the harsh light of a federal courtroom. I accelerated, merging onto the busy interstate. The sleek glass towers of the financial district loomed in the distance. The real war was just beginning. I parked the rented sedan in the subterranean visitor garage of the towering glass skyscraper that housed the prestigious investment firm of my husband. I took a steadying breath, smoothing the wrinkles from my tailored blazer. I needed to look him directly in the eyes. I needed to see if Marcus had even a shred of genuine remorse, or if his soul was entirely consumed by the greedy manipulation of his brother-in-law. I walked confidently through the polished revolving doors into the expansive marble lobby. The air conditioning was freezing sharply, contrasting the humid Atlanta heat outside. I approached the sleek front reception desk. The young blonde receptionist looked up from her dual monitors, and her welcoming professional smile instantly vanished the second she recognized my face. I had been to this office dozens of times for holiday parties and corporate dinners. I was always greeted with absolute deference as the highly successful wife of their youngest vice president. Today, the receptionist looked at me as if I were holding a live grenade. "Good morning, Sarah," I said, keeping my voice perfectly even and pleasant. "I need to see Marcus right away. Please let him know I am waiting in the lobby." Sarah swallowed hard, her eyes darting nervously toward the bank of elevators. "Mrs. Brooks, I am so sorry, but Mr. Brooks left strict instructions this morning." She paused, stammering slightly. "He specifically said he is not accepting any personal visitors today." "I am not a personal visitor, Sarah," I replied, resting my hands flat on the cool marble counter. "I am his wife. I am his." "Call his office right now." Before she could even reach for her sleek telephone receiver, 2 massive men in dark, tailored security suits stepped out from behind the decorative marble pillars. They moved with alarming speed, immediately flanking me on both sides. The taller of the 2 security guards held out a massive hand, gesturing toward the revolving glass doors. "Ma'am, we are going to have to ask you to leave the premises immediately." the tall guard said, his tone completely devoid of any basic courtesy. "If you refuse to comply, we have strict authorization to contact local law enforcement and have you forcefully removed for trespassing." I looked from the stern faces of the security guards back to the terrified receptionist. Marcus had anticipated my arrival. He had actively weaponized the corporate security team of his own firm against his pregnant wife. He was hiding like a pathetic coward on the 50th floor, terrified to face the woman he had just robbed blind. Creating a public scene in the lobby of a major financial institution would accomplish absolutely nothing except validating his fraudulent narrative. "I do not need an escort, gentlemen," I said coldly, stepping away from the reception desk. I straightened my posture, maintaining absolute dignity as I walked out of the building. The security guards shadowed me closely, ensuring I exited the revolving doors and descended the concrete steps. The humiliation was intended to break me, but it only sharpened my absolute resolve. Marcus thought shutting me out of his office would protect him. He completely forgot that I did not need physical access to his desk to completely dismantle his life. I had his digital footprint. I climbed back into my rented sedan and locked the doors. The adrenaline was pulsing heavily through my veins. I reached for my phone, intending to call my lawyer, but the screen was already illuminated with dozens of unread text messages and missed calls. The notifications were pouring in from people I had not spoken to in weeks. Friends from our exclusive country club, fellow alumni from my university, and prominent members of the church congregation run by Mama Geraldine. I opened the first text message from my closest friend from college. It simply read, "Maya, I am so incredibly sorry. Please let me know if you need help finding a good doctor. We are all praying for you." I frowned, staring at the screen. I opened another message from a fellow corporate wife I occasionally played tennis with. It read, "I just saw the email from Marcus. Mental health is so important, Maya. Please do not do anything drastic. We are here for you." A cold knot of pure dread formed tightly in the pit of my stomach. I immediately opened my primary personal email application. Sitting right at the top of my inbox was a massive forwarded message. The original sender was Marcus. He had utilized his expansive digital address book to send a mass email blast to over 300 of our closest friends, family members, and professional acquaintances. I tapped the screen and read the devastating words he had crafted. "To our beloved friends and family, it is with a completely shattered heart that I must share some tragic personal news. Over the past few months, my beautiful wife Maya has been suffering from severe pregnancy psychosis. Her mental state has rapidly deteriorated, leading to aggressive delusions, paranoia, and violent outbursts. Yesterday, she suffered a massive public breakdown at her baby shower, falsely accusing me of infidelity and verbally attacking my mother. The doctors assure me this is a tragic chemical imbalance caused by her pregnancy, but for my own physical safety, I have been forced to leave our home and file an emergency restraining order. Please respect our absolute privacy during this devastating medical crisis and keep Maya in your prayers." I read the incredibly calculated paragraphs 3 times. The sheer audacity of his lies was absolutely staggering. He was not just stealing my money, he was systematically executing a flawless character assassination. By publicly branding me as dangerously insane, he was completely discrediting anything I might say in the future. If I went to the police and claimed my husband stole $250,000, they would look at his restraining order, look at this mass email, and immediately dismiss me as a hysterical, delusional pregnant woman. I sat in the rented sedan, staring at the glowing screen of my smartphone, reading the incredibly calculated email Marcus had sent to our entire social network. If I went to the police and claimed my husband stole $250,000, they would look at his restraining order, look at this mass email, and immediately dismiss me as a hysterical, delusional, pregnant woman. He had essentially built an impenetrable fortress of lies around my reputation. Every single tear I shed, or angry demand I made, would simply be viewed as further proof of my fabricated mental illness. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and gripped the steering wheel tightly. The absolute sheer scale of his betrayal was breathtaking, but it also revealed a fatal flaw in their master plan. The extravagant lengths they were going to in order to discredit me meant they were hiding something significantly larger than a stolen savings account. $250,000 is a lot of money to the average person, but to a corrupt commercial real estate broker like Liam, it is barely a drop in the bucket. I drove back to the secure luxury hotel in downtown Atlanta, my mind racing through thousands of financial variables. I rode the private elevator up to my suite, bypassed the standard hotel security measures, and immediately returned to my war room. I opened my encrypted laptop and aggressively cracked my knuckles. I needed to look significantly deeper into the financial history of Marcus over the past 24 months. If Liam was drowning in debt, he had anchored himself to the pristine credit score and high earning potential of my name. I logged into a highly secure virtual mailbox service I maintained for independent auditing contracts. I had intentionally routed all of my top-tier financial correspondence there years ago to keep my personal and professional lives separated. The digital dashboard of my virtual mailbox indicated an urgent certified letter had been scanned and uploaded just 3 hours ago. The sender was the Department of the Treasury Internal Revenue Service. My pulse quickened slightly as I clicked the securely encrypted link to open the scanned document. It was a formal notice of deficiency and intent to levy. I scanned the densely packed legal text, my highly trained eyes automatically jumping to the bold numerical figures at the bottom of the page. The total amount demanded was exactly $1,142,000. I stopped breathing for a fraction of a second. I leaned closer to the monitor, convinced I had misread the incredibly large number. I had not. It was a massive federal tax lien, and it was issued entirely and exclusively in my legal name. I frantically downloaded the supporting documentation attached to the federal notice. The massive tax debt was tied directly to a private investment fund I had absolutely zero knowledge of. According to the IRS filings, the fund had generated massive short-term capital gains over the last year before completely collapsing and declaring bankruptcy. I pulled up the state business registry and searched the exact name of the fraudulent investment fund. The incorporating documents loaded onto my screen, revealing a heavily notarized signature page. My signature was perfectly forged on the document, designating me as the sole managing partner and primary financial guarantor of the entire operation. Right below my forged signature was the stamped seal of a local public notary. I immediately ran a comprehensive background check on the notary public who had stamped the fraudulent document. The name belonged to a young administrative assistant who worked directly in the commercial real estate office of Liam. The puzzle pieces violently slammed together, forming a terrifyingly clear picture of absolute financial ruin. Marcus and Liam had used my pristine credit score, my unblemished financial history, and my professional credentials as a certified forensic auditor to legitimize a massive fraudulent investment scheme. They had funneled millions of dollars from unknown investors through this fake fund, skimmed the massive profits for themselves, and then intentionally crashed the company. When the massive tax bill inevitably came due, they left my forged name holding the entire bag. The fake mistress, the shattered glass at the baby shower, the fraudulent restraining order, the mass email diagnosing me with pregnancy psychosis. None of it was actually about stealing the $250,000 from our joint savings account. That was just bonus cash for their escape fund. The entire public spectacle was a highly calculated smokescreen designed to completely destroy my personal and professional credibility. When the federal investigators inevitably came knocking to collect their $1,000,000, I would not look like an innocent victim of identity theft. I would look exactly like a completely unhinged, mentally unstable woman desperately trying to blame her innocent husband for her own massive financial crimes. Who would the federal government genuinely believe? The calm, successful investment banker or the hysterical pregnant woman who had just been legally evicted from her own home for violent behavior? They had carefully designed the absolute perfect trap. They expected the crushing weight of the sudden divorce, the public humiliation, and the $1 million federal tax lien to completely break me. They assumed I would just quietly accept a terrible settlement agreement simply to avoid going to federal prison. They thought they had backed a helpless pregnant woman into an inescapable corner. I stared at the formal IRS notice glowing brightly on my screen. The initial shock rapidly evaporated entirely, replaced by a cold, calculating, and utterly ruthless fury. Marcus had absolutely no idea what kind of monster he had just awakened. He had spent 7 years sleeping next to a woman whose literal job was hunting down arrogant white-collar criminals and dismantling their entire lives. I closed the federal tax notice and opened a brand new, heavily encrypted digital file on my desktop. I titled it Operation Scorched Earth. It was no longer just about getting my stolen money back. It was about ensuring Marcus and Liam spent their miserable lives rotting in a prison. The real war was officially on now. I needed a highly credible witness to completely destroy their fabricated narrative from the inside out. Chloe was the absolute weakest link in their entire criminal chain. I ran a continuous digital trace on her mobile phone signal using the tracking software I had installed earlier. The glowing dot on my screen indicated she was currently located at a high-end shopping mall in the downtown district. She was undoubtedly spending the crisp cash Liam had just handed her at the industrial park. I closed my laptop, grabbed my keys, and headed directly to the mall. I bypassed the crowded retail levels and drove my rented sedan deep into the dimly lit underground parking garage. I located her cheap silver compact car, parked near a concrete pillar in a completely deserted section of the lowest parking level. I parked my car 2 spots away, cutting the engine and waiting patiently in the dark. I knew she would eventually return to drop off her shopping bags. Exactly 45 minutes later, the heavy metal door of the stairwell echoed loudly across the empty concrete structure. Chloe walked out carrying 3 massive shopping bags from expensive designer boutiques. She looked incredibly pleased with herself, swinging her car keys and humming a cheerful tune. She had absolutely no idea she was currently being positioned to take the fall for a massive federal financial crime. I stepped out of my rented sedan and stood directly in front of her driver's side door, blocking her path entirely. She stopped dead in her tracks, dropping one of her expensive shopping bags onto the filthy concrete floor. "What are you doing here?" she stammered, taking a quick step backward. Her eyes darted around the empty parking garage, looking desperately for any security guards or bystanders. "Get away from my car right now, or I am calling the police." I did not move a single inch. I crossed my arms and looked at her with complete, absolute calm. "You can certainly call the police, Chloe," I replied, my voice echoing slightly in the vast concrete space. "In fact, they would probably love to speak with you regarding the $1 million federal tax fraud you are currently involved in." Her face drained of all color instantly. "I do not know what you are talking about," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I just did a simple acting job for Liam. He paid me cash to wear a fake belly and yell at your party. That is all I did." I pulled a thick manila folder out of my leather briefcase. I opened it and held up a highly detailed financial spreadsheet for her to see clearly. "Liam is an incredibly greedy and manipulative liar," I stated plainly. "He did not just hire you to play a mistress. He needed a distraction while he wired $250,000 out of my bank account. And more importantly, he needed a completely disposable scapegoat for a massive illegal investment scheme." I stepped closer, forcing her to look directly at the highlighted documents. "Look at this corporate filing, Chloe. This is the offshore shell company Liam used to hide the stolen money. And look whose name is listed as the primary administrative assistant for the fraudulent corporate account." Chloe stared at the highlighted text on the paper. Her eyes widened in absolute sheer terror as she recognized her own full legal name and her own social security number printed clearly on the federal documents. "He stole your identity just like he stole mine," I explained smoothly, letting the devastating reality sink into her mind. While you were busy putting on a cheap sequined dress and a silicone belly, Liam was busy forging your signature on banking documents. When the federal investigators trace the missing funds, they will not find Liam. They will find you. They will see the $5,000 in cash he just handed you, and they will classify it as your cut of the illegal profits. You are going to take the fall for a massive wire fraud, and you will spend the next 20 years in a federal prison. Chloe began to shake uncontrollably. She dropped her remaining shopping bags and leaned heavily against the concrete pillar, gasping for air. But I did not sign anything. She cried out, tears streaming down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. I swear to God, I never signed any banking documents. He just asked for my social security number for a standard background check before he hired me for the acting job. I told him I needed the money to pay off my student loans. I am so stupid. She slid down the rough concrete pillar and sat on the filthy garage floor, burying her face in her hands. I looked down at her, feeling a moment of pity before my forensic training took over again. You are not stupid, Chloe, I said quietly, crouching down to her eye level. You were simply manipulated by a highly experienced predator. But you have a very clear choice to make right now. You can either walk away and let Liam destroy your entire life, or you can help me completely dismantle his criminal empire. She looked up at me, her eyes red and incredibly puffy. How can I possibly help you? She asked, her voice barely a rough whisper. He has all the money and all the power in this city. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a small black digital recording device. I need you to go back to Liam, I instructed, calmly handing her the tiny microphone. I need you to demand more money, and I need you to get him to explicitly admit on tape that he forged those banking documents. If you wear this wire and help me gather the final pieces of evidence, I promise I will hand the entire file over to the federal authorities with a clear recommendation for your immunity. She looked at the device resting in my open palm for a moment before finally nodding. Chloe reached out and took the small digital recorder. I gave her precise instructions on how to activate it and what phrases to use to provoke Liam. I watched her climb back into her car, her previous arrogance replaced by terrifying realization. She drove away from the dark parking garage. She was no longer a threat, but an active informant working directly for my private investigation. I returned to my rented sedan and navigated the heavy city traffic back to my secure luxury hotel suite. I had successfully turned their disposable pawn into my most valuable asset, but a recorded confession was only one piece of the puzzle. I needed the foundational financial architecture of their criminal enterprise. I needed to see exactly how Liam operated his daily business and precisely where the massive sums of money were flowing. I locked the heavy wooden door of my suite and sat down at the glass desk, opening my encrypted laptop once again. Liam worked as a senior broker for a prominent commercial real estate firm in the city. The firm prided itself on luxury developments, but I knew from years of corporate auditing that mid-level real estate brokerages often possessed shockingly inadequate cybersecurity protocols. I did not need to launch a sophisticated cyber attack. I simply needed to exploit human error. Earlier in my investigation, I had discovered the name of the young public notary who stamped the forged investment documents. I ran a quick digital scan of her professional networking profiles and found her personal email address. Using a highly specialized masking software, I drafted a completely innocuous-looking email disguised as an automated system update from the Internal Information Technology department of the real estate firm. I embedded a customized, executable script within a standard calendar attachment. I sent the email and waited, staring intently at my screen. Exactly 14 minutes later, my terminal flashed green. The young notary had clicked the calendar attachment, instantly granting me a secure backdoor access port directly into the private intranet of the brokerage. I bypassed the standard employee portals and dug directly into the master server databases. I began downloading internal memos, confidential client emails, and restricted transaction ledgers. I ran a specialized sorting algorithm searching for any files associated with the offshore shell company and the collapsed investment fund. The initial results were absolutely sickening. Liam was not just committing tax fraud, he was orchestrating a massive, highly coordinated gentrification scam specifically targeting vulnerable elderly black homeowners in historically significant neighborhoods across Atlanta. I opened a heavily encrypted spreadsheet titled Urban Renewal Acquisitions. The columns detailed a ruthless, predatory strategy. Liam and his associates were bribing local municipal code enforcement officers to issue fraudulent building violations to elderly residents on fixed incomes. When the terrified homeowners could not afford the sudden massive fines or the mandatory structural repairs, Liam would swoop in offering to buy their properties for pennies on the dollar. He presented himself as a savior rescuing them from crushing municipal debt. As soon as the deeds were transferred, he flipped the properties to wealthy commercial developers for massive exponential profits. He was systematically destroying generations of black wealth and completely erasing historic communities simply to line his own pockets. The absolute cruelty of his business model made my blood run completely cold. But a gentrification scam of this massive scale required a significant amount of initial liquid capital. Bribing city officials and buying out multiple properties simultaneously required millions of dollars in untraceable cash. The failed investment fund had been designed to hide the profits, but where did the initial seed money come from? I cross-referenced the earliest incoming wire transfers to the business accounts of Liam. My algorithm flagged a series of massive recurring deposits originating from a local community bank. I traced the routing numbers and pulled the registration details for the account. I stared at the screen, feeling a wave of absolute profound disgust wash over me. The originating account belonged to the First Avenue Community Church. It was the exact same church where Mama Geraldine served as the primary financial treasurer and the head of the building committee. For the past decade, the congregation had been aggressively raising funds to build a new community center and a tuition-free daycare facility for working mothers in the neighborhood. Mama Geraldine had been systematically embezzling those sacred charitable funds. She had secretly funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars from the church building fund directly into the predatory real estate shell companies controlled by Liam. Mama Geraldine, the woman who sat in the front pew every single Sunday, wearing her expensive designer hats and judging everyone around her, was actively financing the destruction of her own community. She was stealing from hardworking parishioners to fund a racist gentrification scheme run by her arrogant white son-in-law. The entire picture was finally complete. The real estate market had recently experienced a sudden aggressive downturn. The commercial developers stopped buying the stolen properties from Liam. His cash flow completely dried up. Simultaneously, the IRS had flagged the fraudulent investment fund they used to hide the church money. The entire criminal house of cards was rapidly collapsing. They needed immediate liquid cash to pay off the bribed city officials and keep the church board from auditing the empty building fund. That is exactly why they targeted my $250,000. That is why Marcus had been so willing to sacrifice our marriage and my reputation. They were terrified of going to federal prison. They needed my money to plug the massive holes in their sinking ship, and they needed me legally incapacitated so I could never expose their horrific crimes. I highlighted the transfers linking the stolen church funds to the accounts of Liam. I saved every ledger, every fraudulent code violation, and every internal email to my backup drives. I saved every ledger, every fraudulent code violation, and every internal email to my backup drives. But internal documents can sometimes be argued in court as circumstantial or the result of a sophisticated corporate hack. I needed something far more visceral to completely destroy the smug confidence of Liam. I had my own cell phone video of the payoff in the abandoned industrial park, but defense attorneys are notorious for disputing the timestamp and angle of personal recordings. I needed absolute indisputable proof of his physical presence. I needed high-definition security camera footage from a completely independent, uncompromised source. The industrial park where Liam met Chloe was largely abandoned, but it sat directly adjacent to a heavily secured municipal water treatment facility. During my time investigating corporate embezzlement cases for the city, I had learned exactly how the municipal surveillance grids were structured. I pulled up the public records database for city infrastructure and located the exact coordinates of the water treatment plant. Their perimeter cameras pointed outward, covering the main access roads and the entrance to the crumbling asphalt lot where the clandestine meeting took place. Gaining access to municipal security feeds without a legal subpoena is technically illegal, but my moral compass regarding cyber law had completely vanished the moment Marcus stole my life savings. I opened a highly specialized portal on my encrypted laptop and ran a standard penetration testing protocol against the outdated firewall of the city utility server. It took less than 7 minutes for the system to grant me full administrative viewing privileges. I synced the digital timestamp on the municipal server to the exact hour and minute I had followed Chloe to the meeting. The grainy black and white video feed flickered onto my screen. I watched the silver compact car drive into the frame and park. 12 minutes later, the sleek, dark, luxury SUV glided into the camera view. The municipal camera angle was significantly better and much clearer than my hidden vantage point. It captured the vehicle from a slightly elevated and direct forward position. I zoomed in on the front bumper of the SUV and hit the enhance command. The license plate number snapped into crystal clear focus. It was the exact vanity plate registered to the primary corporate entity of Liam. The video continued playing seamlessly, showing Liam stepping out of the vehicle in his extremely expensive tailored suit. It captured him aggressively, pointing his finger at Chloe and shoving the thick manila envelope of cash into her chest. It was a completely flawless, high-definition recording of a federal crime in progress. I downloaded the raw video file, the encrypted metadata, and the server log, proving the footage was completely unedited. I dragged the massive video file into the master folder on my secure desktop labeled Operation Scorched Earth. I now possessed an impenetrable digital paper trail. I opened a blank document and began constructing a master timeline of their entire conspiracy. I logged the exact date and time Liam began bribing the city code enforcers. I logged the precise moments Mama Geraldine transferred the stolen church funds into the real estate shell accounts. I documented the hour Marcus executed the fraudulent wire transfer from our joint bank account and correlated it directly to the exact minute Chloe crashed my baby shower. Every single lie, every single theft, and every single forged signature was now connected by a thick, unbreakable red line of digital evidence. They had treated me like a naive, disposable obstacle, but I had just spent the last 10 hours dissecting their entire professional and personal lives with the clinical precision of a forensic surgeon. I copied the entire master file onto 3 separate encrypted flash drives. I placed one drive in my waterproof duffel bag and mailed the second drive to my secure virtual postal box. The third drive I slipped directly into my pocket. I leaned back heavily in the ergonomic hotel chair, rubbing my tired eyes. The sun had completely set over the Atlanta skyline, leaving the city bathed in a sea of glowing artificial lights. My back ached from sitting hunched over the keyboard, and the reality of my pregnancy briefly demanded my attention. I placed a hand gently over my stomach. Marcus had been willing to leave his own unborn child completely destitute to save his own skin. He had allowed his vicious family to label the mother of his child as a violently insane woman. Any lingering fraction of love I still harbored for my cowardly husband died completely in that dark hotel room. He was no longer the man I married. He was simply another corrupt target on my audit schedule. My intense focus was suddenly broken by the sharp vibration of my cell phone resting on the glass desk. I glanced at the glowing screen, fully expecting another panicked text message from a confused friend regarding the mass email Marcus had sent. Instead, the incoming notification displayed a name that made my jaw clench tightly. It was a direct text message from Mama Geraldine. I opened the message carefully. It read, "Maya, we need to talk like civilized adults. This entire situation has gotten completely out of hand, and the public spectacle is hurting the reputation of the church. I am willing to meet you at the corner coffee shop near your hotel tomorrow morning. Come alone, and we can settle this quietly." I will bring my personal checkbook. I stared at the highly arrogant message, letting a cold, highly satisfied smile spread across my face. She arrogantly thought throwing a few $1,000s at the discarded foster child would make all the messy legal problems magically disappear. She had absolutely no idea I had just downloaded the exact ledgers proving she was a massive thief. I slowly picked up the device and typed a single definitive word in reply, hitting send without any hesitation. Absolutely perfect. The financial trap was now completely and fully set. The next morning arrived with a heavy blanket of humidity settling over the busy streets of downtown Atlanta. I woke up exceptionally early, feeling more rested than I had in several weeks. The adrenaline of the previous night had completely faded, leaving behind a cold, razor-sharp clarity. Today I was not going to dress like a discarded pregnant wife hiding in a hotel room. I dressed exactly like the senior forensic auditor I was. I selected a tailored charcoal gray maternity suit paired with a crisp white silk blouse and my most intimidating black stilettos. I applied my makeup with absolute precision, ensuring my expression was an impenetrable mask of absolute corporate hostility. I walked out of the luxury hotel and navigated the 2 short blocks to the corner coffee shop Mama Geraldine had specified in her arrogant text message. It was a high-end artisanal cafe catering strictly to wealthy corporate executives and affluent tourists. I spotted her immediately through the large floor-to-ceiling glass windows. Mama Geraldine was sitting at a secluded corner table near the back, wearing a vibrant purple designer suit and an elaborate matching church hat. She was sipping a cappuccino and checking her diamond-encrusted watch, looking highly impatient. She expected me to walk in looking exhausted, defeated, and desperate for a lifeline. I pushed open the heavy glass door and the soft chime alerted her to my arrival. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in my immaculate appearance. I did not look broken. I looked like I was about to execute a hostile corporate takeover. I walked over to her table and sat down in the leather chair directly across from her, completely ignoring her fake welcoming smile. "Good morning, Maya," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I went ahead and ordered you a decaffeinated herbal tea. We must protect the health of the baby after all your unfortunate stress yesterday." I did not touch the ceramic cup. I kept my hands folded neatly on the pristine wooden table, maintaining intense, unblinking eye contact. "Let us skip the pathetic pleasantries, Geraldine," I said, my voice completely devoid of any emotion. "You did not invite me here to discuss herbal tea or my prenatal health. State your exact business so I can get back to mine." Her fake smile faltered instantly, replaced by a tight grimace of genuine disdain. She leaned forward, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "You always were far too aggressive, Maya. That is exactly why you and Marcus were never going to last. You simply do not know how to be a supportive, submissive wife. But I am a Christian woman, and I believe in showing mercy, even to those who have severely wronged my family." I let out a short, dry laugh. "Mercy is a very interesting concept, Geraldine. But please do continue. I am absolutely fascinated to hear your specific definition of mercy today." She reached into her expensive leather handbag and pulled out a thick, crisp manila folder. She placed it squarely on the table and slid it across the smooth surface toward me. I flipped open the heavy cardstock cover. Inside was a dense legal document titled Mutual Non-Disclosure and Separation Agreement. Tucked neatly under a shiny silver paperclip on the very first page was a personal check signed directly by Mama Geraldine. The amount written in her elegant cursive handwriting was exactly $50,000. The memo line incredibly read medical assistance. The sheer insult of the gesture was almost as staggering as the blatant criminality behind it. I looked at the check, and then slowly looked back up at her highly expectant face. "What exactly is this financial transaction purchasing Geraldine?" I asked, keeping my tone entirely conversational. She adjusted her purple hat, acting like a generous benefactor, bestowing a massive gift upon a desperate peasant. "It is a fresh start, Maya. We understand that your severe pregnancy psychosis has caused you to act out in highly embarrassing ways. We are willing to completely overlook the horrible scene you caused at the baby shower. If you sign that document, you agree to a quiet, uncontested divorce. You drop all ridiculous financial claims to the Buckhead mansion, and you walk away cleanly without speaking to the press or any of our mutual friends. In exchange, I am personally giving you $50,000 to help you get back on your feet and seek the psychiatric help you so desperately need. I stared at her, feeling a profound sense of absolute awe at her sheer, unadulterated audacity. She was actively financing an illegal gentrification scheme with stolen church funds. Yet she had the incredible nerve to sit here and loudly question my mental stability. She was offering me $50,000 of her own dirty money to walk away from my own multi-million-dollar estate and my stolen $250,000 savings account. I reached out and picked up the personal check, holding it carefully by the corners. "You are offering me $50,000, I repeated slowly, letting the completely insulting number hang heavily in the air between us. "It is a highly generous offer given your current legal and mental situation," she replied smugly, taking another delicate sip of her expensive cappuccino. "You have absolutely no money left, Maya. Marcus has frozen the joint accounts and the court has legally barred you from the marital home. You cannot even afford to hire a decent divorce attorney right now. Take the check, sign the non-disclosure agreement, and disappear quietly before things get significantly worse for you." I did not sign the thick legal document. Instead, I carefully folded the $50,000 check in half and slipped it directly into the inner breast pocket of my tailored charcoal suit. I then closed the manila folder and pushed it firmly back across the table toward her. "What are you doing?" she hissed, her eyes darting nervously around the crowded coffee shop to ensure no one was watching us. "You must sign the agreement before you take the money. That is how a legal contract works, you foolish girl. I am not signing your ridiculous extortion paperwork, Geraldine," I stated clearly, standing up from the leather chair. "And I am keeping this personal check as physical evidence of a direct corporate bribe. You just handed me a documented financial instrument linking your personal accounts to an ongoing conspiracy to commit federal wire fraud and severe extortion." Her jaw dropped completely open. The smug, aristocratic confidence instantly evaporated from her heavily made-up face. "You cannot do that," she stammered, her voice rising in sudden panic. "Give me that check back right now, Maya." I leaned over the table, placing both of my hands flat against the polished wood, bringing my face inches from hers. "You severely underestimated me, Geraldine," I whispered coldly. "You and Liam thought you could steal my life savings, frame me for $1 million tax fraud, and chase me out of my own home with a fake mistress. But you left an incredibly massive digital trail of stolen church funds and illegal real estate transactions. You are not going to buy my silence for $50,000. You are going to need every single penny of your stolen money to pay for a federal defense attorney." I turned my back on her and walked purposefully toward the exit of the coffee shop, leaving her sitting frozen in absolute terror. As I stepped out into the humid Atlanta morning, my phone immediately buzzed in my pocket. It was an automated alert from the county family court system. Marcus had just filed a severe emergency motion using a forged power of attorney. He was aggressively attempting to sell my Buckhead mansion out from under me in exactly 48 hours. The final battle lines were officially drawn. The digital alert glaring brightly on my phone screen detailed an expedited real estate transaction moving at an entirely unnatural speed. I immediately logged into the secure county clerk portal using my professional access credentials. I downloaded the freshly filed legal documents. The primary document was an emergency petition for the appointment of a temporary conservator combined with an irrevocable power of attorney. I scrolled quickly through the dense legal jargon until I reached the signature page. My own signature stared back at me, flawlessly duplicated right next to the stamp of the exact same corrupt public notary Liam had used for the massive federal tax fraud. The sworn affidavit attached to the petition was signed by Marcus. He claimed under severe penalty of perjury that my supposed pregnancy psychosis had rapidly escalated to a complete catatonic state. He legally asserted that I was temporarily institutionalized, receiving intensive psychiatric care, and completely incapable of managing my own complex financial affairs. Under the completely fabricated guise of protecting our marital assets from my erratic behavior, he was requesting emergency judicial approval to execute a rapid off-market sale of the Buckhead mansion. I carefully examined the accompanying purchase agreement attached to the court filing. The proposed buyer was an anonymous corporate entity listed simply as Cascade Holdings Private Limited. I opened a new browser tab and ran a rapid forensic trace on the corporate registry. Unsurprisingly, the holding company was a recently formed subsidiary directly linked to the commercial real estate firm of Liam. The purchase price listed on the fraudulent contract was an absolute joke. They were attempting to sell my $3 million pristine estate for a mere $800,000. The financial strategy was incredibly transparent and utterly ruthless. Liam was buying the house for a tiny fraction of its actual market value using the very same charitable church funds Mama Geraldine had just embezzled. Marcus would get the immediate liquid cash he desperately needed to pay off the looming IRS investigators, while Liam would immediately flip the mansion to a legitimate buyer for a massive $2 million untraceable profit. They had engineered a rigid 48-hour closing window. Standard real estate transactions legally require significantly more time for mandatory escrow and thorough title clearance, but Liam had clearly bribed a corrupt local title agent to completely bypass the mandatory waiting periods. If the family court judge approved the emergency motion based on the forged medical documents, the deed would officially transfer this coming Sunday afternoon, and my beloved home would be legally stolen. The sheer aggressive velocity of their plan meant they were completely panicking. The federal tax collectors were actively closing in on their collapsed investment fund, and Liam was desperately burning every single bridge to generate immediate operational liquidity. A normal person would have completely panicked and immediately called the local police or barged into the downtown courthouse screaming about forged signatures. But my specialized training dictated a completely different approach. I knew that walking into a family court with a massive folder of unverified digital evidence, while a restraining order and a highly publicized medical defamation campaign hung heavily over my head, was a massive tactical error. The conservative family court judge would likely delay the proceedings order an invasive independent psychiatric evaluation to verify the claims of Marcus and freeze the entire asset in lengthy probate litigation. I did not have months to fight them in a slow civil court, while they destroyed my professional reputation. I needed a swift, highly decisive execution. I needed overwhelming federal jurisdiction, and I needed to trap all of them in the exact same room while they committed the final irreversible act of wire fraud. I meticulously reviewed the legal requirements for closing the fraudulent real estate transaction. Even with a forged power of attorney, Marcus would still be legally required to sign the final transfer of deed documents in the physical presence of the buyer and a licensed closing agent. Liam would undoubtedly act as the sole representative for his corrupt holding company. They were planning to finalize the illicit sale this coming Sunday. The traditional Sunday dinner was an incredibly sacred institution in the family of my husband. Every single Sunday without fail, Mama Geraldine hosted a massive formal dinner at her sprawling suburban home. It was the weekly stage where they all gathered to perform their flawless, wealthy family routine for the local community. They would definitely use that secure private gathering to sign the final closing documents away from the prying eyes of the public or any legitimate banking officials. I closed the court documents on my laptop and leaned back in my chair. The 48-hour deadline was not a threat to me anymore. It was a perfectly timed countdown to their absolute destruction. To make this trap work flawlessly, I needed Marcus to bring those fraudulent closing documents directly to me. I needed him to believe that his cruel campaign of psychological warfare had completely succeeded. I needed him to truly think the fake restraining order, the frozen bank accounts, the stolen savings, and the public humiliation had finally broken my spirit. If he believed I was genuinely surrendering, he would drop his defensive guard entirely. He would desperately want to gloat. Liam would absolutely want to be there to personally witness my ultimate financial submission. Mama Geraldine would want to host the entire event to maintain her absolute control over the family narrative. I picked up my cell phone from the glass desk. I did not call my lawyer. I did not call the police. I took a deep, steadying breath, forcing my heart rate to slow down to a calm, resting rhythm. I closed my eyes and completely internalized the fragile persona of a defeated, terrified, pregnant woman who had just lost absolutely everything. I opened my contacts and pressed the call button for Marcus, preparing to deliver the greatest acting performance of my entire life. The phone rang 3 times before he finally answered. I could hear the ambient noise of a crowded restaurant in the background. He was currently out celebrating his impending illegal windfall, while I was supposed to be locked away inside a psychiatric ward. "Hello," he answered, his voice dripping with defensive irritation. "Maya, you are legally violating the court restraining order right now. I have my attorney on speed dial, and I will absolutely call the local police if you ever threaten me again." I did not respond immediately. I forced my breathing to become incredibly shallow and rapid. I let out a loud, ragged sob, completely abandoning my natural composed tone. "Marcus, please," I gasped, forcing a violent tremble into my voice. "Please do not hang up on me. I am so completely tired and I just cannot do this anymore." The line went totally silent for a very long moment. The background noise of the restaurant vanished, indicating he had walked outside. "Maya," he asked, his tone shifting from aggressive to highly cautious. "Are you crying right now?" I let out another pathetic wailing sob, ensuring it sounded exactly like I was completely hyperventilating in sheer panic. "I just saw the emergency court filing Marcus," I cried out, my voice cracking perfectly. "I saw the legal papers for the house. You are now taking absolutely everything. You are taking my home and my money, and you told everyone I am completely insane. I have absolutely nobody left to turn to. My friends will not even return my desperate phone calls. You completely ruined my own entire life." I could practically hear the arrogant smirk forming on his face. He took a deep, patronizing breath, adopting the fake compassionate tone he used to manipulate his wealthy investment clients. "Maya, baby, you brought this entirely on yourself," he said softly. "I tried to get you the medical assistance you so desperately need, but you violently attacked my family. You left me with absolutely no other choice. I have to protect my assets from your severe mental instability." I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste copper, keeping my cold fury completely out of my voice. "I know," I whispered, adopting a tone of utter absolute defeat. "I know I am sick, Marcus. Mama Geraldine was right. Liam was always right. I am totally out of control. I need serious professional psychiatric help. I surrender to you now." "What exactly does that mean, Maya?" he asked, his voice suddenly sharp with overwhelming greed. "It means I am not going to fight the emergency court motion," I sobbed, wiping a fake tear. "It means I will voluntarily sign the divorce papers. I will sign the irrevocable power of attorney. I will sign the title transfer for the Buckhead mansion. You can have the massive house, Marcus. You can have absolutely everything. I just want this horrific nightmare to end before I end up permanently locked inside an institution. I just want to go away quietly and check myself into a highly secure private medical facility." The absolute silence on his end of the line was truly deafening. He was rapidly mentally calculating the massive victory he had just effortlessly secured. No expensive, lengthy legal battles, no prolonged, messy public divorce proceedings. Just a clean, immediate signature ensuring his $1 million illicit payout. But I intimately knew his highly cautious, very cowardly nature. I needed to offer him a highly specific scenario that appealed directly to his massive unearned ego. "But I have one final condition, Marcus," I pleaded. "I will sign every single legal document you want, but I will not do it alone in a cold, sterile lawyer office. I want to do it on Sunday. At the traditional formal Sunday dinner with Mama Geraldine and Liam." "Why on earth would you want to do that?" he scoffed, his suspicion flaring up rapidly again. "You utterly hate my family and they are absolutely terrified of you." "Because I desperately need to make peace before God," I cried, leaning heavily into the twisted religious manipulation. I need to look Mama Geraldine directly in the eyes and personally apologize. I need to formally apologize for disrespecting her and the entire church congregation. I need to sincerely apologize to Liam for accusing him of those horrible things at the baby shower. I want to sign the real estate papers in front of the assembled family so everyone clearly knows I am voluntarily stepping away to get the mental help I truly need. Please, Marcus, allow me this one final small piece of dignity before I leave your life forever. I held my breath, waiting patiently for his ultimate response. I knew Marcus was incredibly weak, but Mama Geraldine was obsessed. She was deeply obsessed with public optics and absolute familial control. The incredible opportunity to have the arrogant, successful foster child literally grovel at her feet and beg for religious forgiveness in her own pristine dining room would be absolutely irresistible to her. It was the ultimate narcissistic power fantasy. "Hold on," he muttered, putting the cellular phone on mute. He was definitely calling Liam or his mother on another line to excitedly confirm the new strategy. I sat alone in the quiet luxury hotel room staring intensely at my reflection. Exactly 2 minutes later, the line clicked back over. "All right, Maya," Marcus said, his voice thick with smug, triumphant superiority. "Mama Geraldine has graciously agreed to host you this coming Sunday. We will have the notary present and all the final closing documents printed and ready for your immediate signature. But if you try to pull any crazy stunts, I will have you arrested before you even reach the front door." "I absolutely understand, Marcus," I whispered very meekly. "Thank you for showing me such Christian mercy." I ended the call and smiled. The trap was now set. It was officially time to call in the heavy federal artillery. The trap was now set. It was officially time to call in the federal artillery. I placed my cell phone flat on the glass desk and took a deep, stabilizing breath. While I was meticulously planning their destruction, Marcus and Liam were undoubtedly celebrating what they believed was a flawless victory. I could easily picture them sitting in a dimly lit exclusive steakhouse in downtown Atlanta, ordering expensive bourbon and aggressively clinking their crystal glasses together. Marcus was likely soaking up the arrogant praise of his older brother-in-law, completely convinced he had effortlessly outsmarted his highly educated wife. Liam was probably mentally spending the massive profits he planned to make from flipping my beautiful Buckhead estate. They were intoxicated by their own perceived brilliance, completely blind to the legal crosshairs slowly locking onto their exact location. I did not have the luxury of celebrating just yet. I packed my encrypted laptop, the physical files, and the secure flash drives into my waterproof duffel bag. I dressed in a dark, inconspicuous trench coat, pulled my hair back into a tight bun, and left the hotel suite. I drove my rented sedan away from the city center, heading toward a quiet, unassuming diner, located on the far outskirts of the metropolitan area. It was the kind of completely forgettable establishment that served terrible black coffee and catered primarily to weary truck drivers. It was exactly the kind of highly secure location a federal agent chooses for a clandestine meeting. I parked in the shadows at the very back of the cracked asphalt lot and walked inside. The diner was nearly empty except for a tired waitress wiping down the sticky laminate counter and a solitary figure sitting in a deep red vinyl booth in the far back corner. Special Agent David Vance was a formidable man in his late 50s with sharp, observant gray eyes and a stern expression. He had been my advising professor during my forensic accounting graduate program before returning to active duty as the lead investigator for the white-collar crime division of the FBI branch in Atlanta. He was the one who initially taught me how to trace dark money through international shell companies. He looked up from his black coffee as I slid into the vinyl booth across from him. "You look incredibly tense, Maya." He noted, his low, gravelly voice carrying easily over the soft hum of the diner refrigerator. "You specifically requested an emergency offline meeting, and you used my old university call sign. This better be a massive case." I did not waste any time with pleasantries or personal emotional catching up. I immediately pulled the thick manila folder and one of the encrypted digital flash drives from my duffel bag, placing them squarely on the sticky table between us. I have a massive federal wire fraud case involving stolen charitable funds, severe identity theft, forged legal documents, and a coordinated gentrification scam, I stated, leaning forward. The primary targets are a senior commercial real estate broker named Liam and a vice president of investment banking named Marcus. Vance raised a single gray eyebrow, picking up the flash drive and examining it carefully. Marcus is your legal husband, he stated matter-of-factly. He is currently my husband, I corrected him coldly. He is the absolute fool who just initiated a fraudulent $250,000 wire transfer to an offshore shell company. But that is honestly the smallest crime in this entire file. Vance opened the heavy manila folder and began quickly scanning the top documents. I watched his trained eyes dart across the pages, absorbing the complex financial ledgers, fake tax deficiency notices, and forged notary stamps. When he reached the printed screenshots of the church embezzlement records and the predatory property acquisitions, his jaw tightened visibly. "This is incredibly bold," he murmured, flipping to the high-definition, still images captured from the municipal water treatment security camera showing Liam handing the envelope of cash to the fake mistress. They are bribing municipal code enforcers to steal homes from elderly residents and using stolen church money to fund the acquisitions. This is a severe federal racketeering charge, Maya. I know, I replied, my voice completely steady. And they are attempting to execute the final massive piece of their scheme this coming Sunday. Marcus filed an emergency family court motion using a completely forged medical affidavit claiming I am currently suffering from severe violent pregnancy psychosis. He used a fake power of attorney to authorize the immediate off-market sale of my Buckhead mansion to a corrupt holding company controlled by Liam. They are planning to sign the final transfer documents this Sunday afternoon at a private family dinner. Vance closed the thick folder and looked directly into my eyes. His expression shifted from analytical curiosity to the predatory focus of a seasoned federal hunter. "You want to execute a coordinated sting operation right in the middle of their Sunday dinner?" he asked, a faint, satisfied smile touching his mouth. "I want them caught dead to rights while actively committing federal wire fraud." I confirmed, nodding slowly. "They chose to publicly humiliate me and destroy my professional reputation. They weaponized my pregnancy to steal my life savings. I want the federal task force waiting directly outside the dining room windows when they sign those forged real estate documents." Vance slid the folder and flash drive into his heavy leather briefcase, snapping the locks shut with a sharp click. "I will take this evidence directly to the federal magistrate tonight," he said, standing up. "I will secure the immediate arrest warrants based on the forged documents and municipal surveillance video. We will assemble a specialized tactical financial crimes unit tomorrow morning. Give me the exact address of this Sunday dinner, Maya." I wrote the suburban address on a small napkin and handed it across the table. The legal trap was fully constructed. Right now, we just had to wire the entire house. The logistics of infiltrating my own legally restricted property required absolute precision. At 2 a.m. Saturday, the unmarked black utility van pulled into the dark alleyway positioned directly behind my Buckhead estate. I sat in the passenger seat next to Special Agent Vance, watching the heavy rain wash over the windshield. Marcus and Liam assumed the fake restraining order had effectively locked me out of the mansion. They completely forgot that I personally oversaw the installation of the comprehensive smart home security system. I had intentionally maintained a hidden administrative backdoor access code completely separate from the primary application Marcus controlled. I pulled out my smartphone and disabled the exterior perimeter alarms, shutting down the motion sensors covering the rear garden entrance. Vance signaled to the 3 technicians dressed entirely in dark tactical gear. We moved quickly and silently through the pouring rain, slipping through the heavy wrought iron gate and approaching the rear patio doors. I bypassed the biometric scanner, using a manual override key I had hidden inside a hollowed-out decorative brick near the foundation months ago. The heavy glass door clicked open smoothly, granting us undetected access to the silent mansion. The house interior felt entirely foreign now. The expensive furniture, the curated art pieces, and the lingering scent of the designer cologne Marcus wore all felt like remnants of a completely fabricated past life. But I forced my emotions deep down into a tightly locked mental box. I was not a grieving wife walking through the graveyard of her broken marriage. I was a specialized consultant actively assisting a federal raid. We moved directly into the massive formal dining room. This sprawling space with its long mahogany table and 12 custom upholstered chairs was exactly where Mama Geraldine would insist on staging my final humiliation. Vance directed his technicians to begin the immediate installation of the covert surveillance equipment. The federal technology was highly sophisticated and invisible to the naked eye. A female technician carefully removed the ornate crystal centerpiece from the middle of the dining table. She drilled a microscopic hole directly into the wooden base, inserting a high-definition wide-angle camera lens, completely indistinguishable from the decorative brass fittings. This primary camera would capture the exact moment Marcus pushed the forged real estate documents across the table and the precise moment Liam signed his fraudulent corporate alias. Two other technicians were actively working on the massive crystal chandelier hanging directly above the table. They seamlessly wired advanced omnidirectional microphones into the electrical housing, ensuring every single whispered threat, every arrogant insult, and every verbal confirmation of their financial crimes would be recorded with absolute crystal-clear acoustic fidelity. I stood in the corner of the dining room, actively directing the placement of a secondary camera. I pointed toward the ornate antique buffet cabinet positioned against the far wall. Mama Geraldine always stood exactly there when serving her signature dessert. I whispered to Vance, pointing at the specific angle. She likes to literally stand over her guests to assert dominance. If you place a camera in the eye of that porcelain vase, you will capture her face perfectly when she inevitably brags about orchestrating this entire fake divorce. Vance nodded approvingly, signaling the technician to modify the vase. You know their psychological profiles better than any profiler I have on my payroll, Maya, he observed quietly. They are incredibly predictable, I replied, crossing my arms to ward off the sudden chill in the large room. Narcissists always follow the exact same behavioral patterns. They truly believe they are the smartest people in the room, which makes them incredibly careless with their operational security. The installation process took exactly 2 hours. We meticulously tested the audio feeds and the visual resolution using a secure encrypted tablet. The footage was being transmitted in real time directly to a mobile command center the federal agents would establish in a parked surveillance vehicle down the street on Sunday afternoon. Everything was completely flawless. We wiped down every surface we touched, leaving absolutely no physical trace of our midnight intrusion. Before we exited through the rear patio doors, I stood alone in the dining room for one final moment. I looked at the head of the mahogany table where Marcus usually sat, playing the role of the benevolent, wealthy patriarch. I pictured Liam sitting to his right, sipping my expensive wine, and plotting to steal the very roof over my head. I pictured Mama Geraldine sitting to his left, wearing her stolen church funds disguised as designer clothing. They had severely poisoned this house with their unyielding greed and their breathtaking cruelty. But this dining room was about to become their ultimate legal tomb. I walked out into the cold rain, locking the glass door securely behind me. I reactivated the exterior security sensors, ensuring the alarm system showed absolutely no disruptions in its digital log. I climbed back into the unmarked federal van, pulling my wet trench coat tightly around my shoulders. Vance handed me a sterile earpiece completely molded to fit invisibly inside my ear canal. "We will be actively listening to every single word, Maya," he stated, his voice carrying a heavy, reassuring authority. "You lead the conversation. You get them to explicitly confirm the fraudulent investment fund, the fake power of attorney, and the church embezzlement. The absolute second they place their physical signatures on those closing documents, you give the verbal safe word." "What is the safe word?" he asked. I looked out the dark window, watching my beautiful mansion fade into the heavy shadows of the stormy night. "The safe word is audit," I replied softly. The van pulled out of the alleyway, heading back toward the highly secure downtown hotel. I had exactly 24 hours left to mentally prepare for the greatest confrontation of my entire life. I was going to walk into the lion den completely unarmed, and I was going to absolutely destroy the entire pride. Sunday afternoon arrived with stifling heat. I parked my rented sedan at the end of my driveway, staring up at the brick facade of the Buckhead mansion. Mama Geraldine decided to move her traditional Sunday dinner to my house this week. It was her ultimate power play. She wanted to physically occupy the estate and gloat over her victory while I legally signed it away. I touched my right ear, ensuring the federal earpiece was securely in place. I heard the low voice of Special Agent Vance instantly. "We have eyes and ears on the interior, Maya," he confirmed from the surveillance van parked down the street. "The audio and visual feeds are active. You are good to go." I stepped out of the car and walked up the brick steps. I did not use my key. The mahogany front door was wide open. I stepped into the grand foyer and was hit by loud sounds of celebratory laughter and the clinking of crystal. They were not trying to hide their immense satisfaction. I walked toward the formal living room and observed the sickening scene unfolding in my home. Marcus stood by the stone fireplace, wearing a tailored navy suit, holding a glass of my vintage champagne. He was laughing at a joke Liam just made. Liam, dressed in an expensive gray linen suit, leaned casually against the leather sofa, looking like a predatory shark, cornering his bleeding prey. Mama Geraldine sat in my favorite armchair, wearing a vibrant yellow church dress, acting like the wealthy matriarch of a newly conquered kingdom. A corrupt notary public sat nervously on the edge of the sofa. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," Liam announced, loudly swirling the golden champagne in his crystal glass. His cruel voice silenced the room. Everyone turned to look at me standing in the doorway. I kept my head bowed, playing the role of the utterly defeated woman. Marcus stepped forward, setting his glass down on the mantel. He looked me up and down with an expression of intense, arrogant pity. "You actually came, Maya," he said, his voice dripping with fake condescension. "I honestly thought you would have another psychological episode and barricade yourself in that cheap hotel room." I shook my head slowly, keeping my eyes firmly fixed on the hardwood floor. "I told you I surrender, Marcus," I whispered, making my voice tremble just enough to sound completely broken. "I just want to sign the legal papers and leave this terrible nightmare behind me." Mama Geraldine let out a loud theatrical sigh. "It is truly a tragedy it had to come to this, Maya," she declared, smoothing her dress. "But we are simply doing what is necessary to protect my son and his assets from your severe mental instability." I nodded meekly, fighting the urge to slap the smugness right off her face. I followed them as they moved triumphantly into the massive formal dining room. The hidden federal cameras were actively recording every single movement. The table was elegantly set with my best fine china and silver cutlery. They completely raided my private wine cellar, bringing up expensive bottles of champagne. Liam took a seat near the head of the mahogany table, pulling a thick stack of legal documents from his leather briefcase. He slapped the heavy paperwork down onto the polished wood with a loud, satisfying thud. "Have a seat right here, Maya," Liam ordered, pointing to the chair directly across from him. "Let us get this over with quickly so we can finally enjoy our Sunday dinner in peace." I walked slowly to the chair and sat down. I looked up at the massive crystal chandelier, knowing a high-definition microphone was capturing every breath drawn in this room. The young notary nervously arranged her official stamping equipment on the table. She completely avoided making any eye contact with me. Marcus stood directly behind my chair, placing a heavy, controlling hand on my shoulder. It was a calculated physical gesture meant to intimidate me into rapid compliance. "Here is how this is going to work, Maya." Marcus explained, his voice cold and authoritative. "First, you sign the irrevocable power of attorney surrendering your financial rights due to your psychiatric condition. Then you sign the deed transfer permanently relinquishing your ownership of this property to the holding company of Liam. Once the notary stamps the legal documents, I will personally write you a check for $10,000 to cover your immediate medical expenses. I stared at the dense legal documents resting on the polished table. $10,000. They were stealing $250,000 in cash and a $3 million estate and offering me a pathetic $10,000 settlement. It was the ultimate insult. I looked across the table at Liam, his greedy eyes locked onto the signature lines. Cascade Holdings, Private Limited, I read aloud, keeping my voice soft and hesitant. Is that the name of the new buyer, Liam? He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. It is a secure corporate entity, Maya. He lied effortlessly. It guarantees a rapid cash transaction so Marcus can quickly settle his affairs and move on. You do not need to worry about the corporate details. You just need to sign your name right now. I glanced over at Mama Geraldine, who was standing precisely by the antique buffet cabinet, perfectly framed by the secondary hidden camera. And you are completely okay with this, Geraldine? I asked, my voice wavering perfectly. You are okay with me losing my home today? She smiled a terrible, chilling smile. It is not your home anymore, Maya, she stated with cruel finality. It belongs to this family now. Just sign the papers so we can eat. I picked up the heavy black pen resting next to the documents. I held it over the signature line, letting the intense silence stretch heavily across the dining room. The trap was fully closed around them. I held the pen over the signature line, letting the intense silence stretch heavily across the dining room. The trap was fully closed around them. I did not press the ink to the paper. Instead, I slowly opened my fingers, letting the heavy black pen drop from my grasp. It hit the polished mahogany table with a sharp clatter and rolled off the edge, landing silently on the expensive Persian rug below. What are you doing? Liam snapped, his gray eyes narrowing in immediate annoyance. Pick up the pen and sign the document, Maya. We do not have time for your theatrical hesitations. I ignored him completely. I reached down to the floor next to my chair and hoisted my heavy leather briefcase onto my lap. The metal clasps echoed loudly in the quiet room as I snapped them open. Marcus stepped forward again, his face darkening with sudden anger. He was completely terrified of any delay that might ruin his massive payday. Maya, I am warning you, Marcus growled, his voice dropping to a harsh, threatening register. Do not play games right now. I have the police on speed dial, and I will absolutely have you dragged out of here in handcuffs for violating the restraining order. I pulled a stack of pristine red legal folders from my briefcase. I did not bring you games, Marcus, I replied, my voice completely calm and devoid of the fake trembling I had used earlier. I brought you some highly educational reading material. I slid the first red folder directly across the smooth wooden table toward Liam. It stopped right next to his stack of forged real estate documents. I handed the second red folder backward over my shoulder to Marcus, without even turning around to look at him. I stood up, picking up the third red folder, and walked slowly toward the antique buffet cabinet where Mama Geraldine was standing. I held it out to her. She looked at the bright red cardboard as if it were a venomous snake, refusing to take it from my hand. I simply dropped it onto the buffet cabinet, right next to her porcelain vase, perfectly within the view of the hidden federal camera. What is the meaning of this absolute nonsense? Mama Geraldine demanded, her voice rising in shrill indignation. I will not tolerate this blatant disrespect in my family home. This is my home, Geraldine. I corrected her sharply, my voice cutting through the humid air like a physical blade. And I suggest you open the folder before you say another word. You will severely regret. Liam snatched his folder off the table and ripped it open. He intended to mock whatever I had brought, but the moment his eyes hit the first page, his arrogant smirk instantly vanished. The color drained completely out of his face, leaving him looking like a pale, terrified ghost. Marcus opened his folder a second later. He stared at the top document, his breathing suddenly becoming shallow and ragged. The atmosphere in the dining room shifted immediately from triumphant celebration to absolute crushing terror. What is this? Marcus whispered, his hands beginning to shake violently. That is a detailed forensic accounting of your entire pathetic existence over the last 48 hours. I stated loudly, walking back to my chair at the table. Page 1, is the undeniable proof of the $250,000 wire transfer you initiated from our joint savings account to the offshore shell company of Liam. Page 2 is the digital footprint of the completely fake emergency restraining order you filed under penalty of perjury. And page 3 Marcus Y paused, letting a cold, terrifying smile spread across my face. Page 3 is the formal tax lien from the Internal Revenue Service for over $1 million attached to a fraudulent investment fund you and Liam created, using my forged signature. The young notary sitting on the sofa let out a loud gasp and stood up, dropping her stamping equipment. She stared at Liam in absolute horror, recognizing her own involvement in the forged documents. She realized instantly she had been completely set up as an accessory to a massive federal crime. Liam slammed his folder shut, his eyes darting frantically around the room. "This is completely fabricated garbage," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You hacked into my personal business files. This is illegal cyber espionage. Maya and no court will ever accept this as evidence. You are absolutely insane." "I did not hack anything I needed, Liam," I replied calmly, leaning forward and resting my hands on the mahogany table. "I simply followed the massive sloppy trail of digital breadcrumbs you left behind. You thought you were a brilliant criminal mastermind, but you are nothing more than a cheap, greedy fraud. You hired a 24-year-old girl named Chloe to fake a pregnancy and ruin my baby shower for $5,000. Mama Geraldine let out a sharp gasp. "That is a horrible lie," she sputtered, clutching her chest. "Marcus, tell me she is lying right now." Marcus could not speak. He was staring at the printed screenshots in his folder. The high-definition images clearly showed Liam handing the thick envelope of cash to Chloe in the abandoned industrial lot. The timestamps correlated perfectly with the timeline I had explicitly laid out. "It is not a lie, Geraldine." I continued, my voice rising slightly to dominate the chaotic room. "Chloe wore a silicone belly and crashed my party to create a massive public distraction. Liam needed me out of this house so he could execute his master plan. He needed to sell my $3 million estate for $800,000 to his own corrupt holding company." Liam lunged forward across the table, his face twisted in absolute vicious rage. "Shut your mouth right now, you crazy bitch," he roared, reaching for my throat. I did not flinch. I did not even blink. I stood my absolute ground, staring directly into his furious eyes. "Touch me, Liam, and I promise you will spend the rest of your miserable life in a federal prison," I warned, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "You are already facing 20 years for wire fraud, identity theft, and severe extortion. Do you really want to add the physical assault of a pregnant woman to your federal indictment?" Liam froze, his hands hovering mere inches from my face. The sheer absolute certainty in my voice pierced through his aggressive bravado. He slowly lowered his hands, backing away from the table. He was breathing heavily, looking like a trapped animal desperately searching for an exit. The massive ego that had fueled his entire life was rapidly collapsing under the crushing weight of undeniable evidence. Marcus finally found his voice. He dropped the red folder onto the floor and took a step toward me, holding up his hands in a pathetic gesture of complete surrender. "Maya, please," he begged, his voice cracking completely. "We can fix this. I am so sorry. Liam forced me into this. He said he was drowning in debt and he needed the money to save his business. I never wanted to hurt you. You sent an email to 300 of our closest friends claiming I was violently insane, Marcus." I reminded him coldly, shutting down his pathetic attempt at apologies. "You tried to leave me completely destitute while carrying your own child. You do not get to play the innocent victim anymore." Mama Geraldine stepped forward, holding her red folder with shaking hands. She looked completely terrified. "What debt is he talking about?" she asked, looking frantically between Liam and Marcus. "Why did Liam need so much money that he would force my son to do this terrible thing?" I turned my absolute focus onto Mama Geraldine, pointing directly at the folder in her trembling hands. "Why do not you turn to page 4? Geraldine." I suggested, my tone completely devoid of any mercy. Turn to page 4 and read exactly how your precious son-in-law was financing his illegal real estate empire. The confrontation had officially ignited, and the flames were about to consume every single one of them. Mama Geraldine opened the folder, her perfectly manicured fingers trembling violently against the thick red cardboard. She slowly turned to page 4. It was a comprehensive side-by-side ledger matching the massive unauthorized withdrawals from the First Avenue Community Church Building Fund directly to the aggressive incoming wire transfers of the Cascade Holdings real estate accounts. I even took the absolute liberty of highlighting the corresponding dates in bright yellow ink. Mama Geraldine let out a strangled gasp, sounding exactly like a woman actively drowning. "This is a mistake," she stammered, looking desperately at Liam. "I only loaned you a small portion of the church funds, Liam. You promised me you would return it with massive interest before the quarterly financial board meeting. You explicitly told me it was a guaranteed bridge loan. You stole from the church building fund," Marcus yelled, his voice cracking with absolute disbelief. "Mama, how could you possibly do that? You are the head treasurer. I did it for our family," she shrieked hysterically, pointing an accusing finger directly at Liam. "He told me he was going to lose his broker license if he did not secure immediate liquidity. He swore he was buying properties at wholesale prices. He was stealing homes from vulnerable elderly Black residents using predatory municipal code violations," I clarified sharply, cutting through her pathetic excuses. "And you actively funded his racist gentrification campaign with the donations of hardworking parishioners. When the federal investigators audit the church financial ledgers tomorrow morning, you will not be a respected elder anymore, Geraldine. You will simply be a convicted embezzler." Liam slammed his hands down on the mahogany table, rattling the fine china. "Enough of this absolute garbage," he roared, his face twisting into a mask of pure desperation. "She is bluffing. She has a few printed spreadsheets she fabricated on her computer. She has absolutely zero concrete physical evidence to present to a grand jury. Nobody is going to believe a severely mentally ill pregnant woman over a senior real estate executive." I simply smiled, tapping the screen of my smartphone resting on the table. "Is that right, Liam?" I asked softly. I swiped my finger across the digital screen, instantly casting my secure video file to the massive 85-inch smart television mounted on the wall of the adjacent formal living room. The large screen flared to life, instantly drawing the terrified attention of every single person in the room. The high-definition black-and-white footage from the municipal water treatment facility began playing in perfect clarity. There was the silver compact car. There was the sleek black luxury SUV bearing the exact vanity license plate of Liam. The camera perfectly captured Liam stepping out of his vehicle, aggressively pointing his finger into the face of Chloe. It clearly showed him shoving the thick manila envelope of untraceable cash directly into her hands. The digital timestamp in the bottom right corner of the screen perfectly corroborated the exact hour I had stated earlier. The entire dining room fell into a horrifyingly silent stillness. The only sound was the low hum of the television screen, repeating the devastating transaction on an endless loop. Liam stared at the massive television, his jaw hanging completely open, his arrogant superiority completely shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The young notary let out a quiet whimper and slowly backed away toward the front hallway, desperate to escape the massive federal conspiracy actively unraveling before her. Mama Geraldine collapsed back into her chair, burying her face in her hands and beginning to sob uncontrollably. Her entire meticulously crafted social identity was entirely obliterated. Marcus, however, did not collapse. The pure cowardice that had defined his entire life suddenly morphed into a vicious, cornered desperation. He grabbed the formal tax lien document from his red folder and walked aggressively toward my end of the table. He threw the official IRS notice down right in front of me, jabbing his index finger onto the thick legal paper. "You think you are so incredibly smart, Maya?" he sneered, his chest heaving with rapid, anxious breaths. You think a single video of Liam paying off a cheap actress completely saves you. You are forgetting one massive detail. You are the sole legal guarantor of the collapsed investment fund. I looked up at him, maintaining my absolute calm. I am well aware of the fraudulent fund, Marcus. Then you know the IRS is demanding over $1 million in back taxes and severe penalties, he shouted, leaning over me to intimidate me. Your signature is stamped perfectly on every single incorporating document. Liam made absolutely sure of that. If you try to take this pathetic folder of evidence to the authorities, they will immediately arrest you for massive federal tax fraud. You will give birth to our child inside a federal penitentiary. He picked up the forged deed transfer and slammed it down on top of the IRS notice. He grabbed the black pen from the floor and aggressively shoved it into my hand. You are going to sign this real estate transfer right now, he commanded, his voice dropping to a vicious, threatening register. You are going to sign the house over to the holding company of Liam, so we can secure the cash to quietly settle this entire mess. If you do exactly what I tell you and keep your mouth completely shut, I will personally hire a lawyer to help you navigate the massive IRS audit. But if you refuse to sign this deed today, I will immediately testify to the federal government that you orchestrated the entire tax fraud completely alone. He was attempting to extort me using the exact tax crime he committed. I carefully placed the black pen back onto the mahogany table. I looked directly into the furious eyes of the man I had once loved. I felt absolutely nothing but a cold, clinical detachment. You are incredibly stupid, Marcus, I said softly. You are incredibly stupid, Marcus, I said softly. You spent 7 years married to a senior forensic auditor, and you honestly believed I would not immediately verify the origin of $1 million federal tax lien. Did you genuinely think I would just panic and cower like a frightened child? I did not just find the formal tax notice, Marcus. I actively traced the exact IP address used to file the fraudulent corporate documents online. It perfectly matches the secure internal network of the real estate firm of Liam. I ran a full comprehensive background check on your corrupt notary public sitting right there on my sofa. She already left an incredibly massive digital footprint of completely illegal financial transactions. You cannot extort me with a massive federal crime I have already meticulously documented and reported directly to the federal government. Marcus faltered, stepping back as the sheer reality of my sharp words finally penetrated his massive, unearned ego. Reported, he echoed, his voice barely a hollow whisper. Who exactly did you report this to, Maya? I stood up from the mahogany table, smoothing down the front of my tailored maternity suit. I looked at the three of them, capturing their terrified faces in my memory. I reported it to my former university advising professor. I stated clearly, projecting my voice so the hidden microphones would pick up every single syllable. His name is Special Agent David Vance, and he is currently the lead investigator for the white-collar crime division of the FBI branch in Atlanta. Liam let out a loud, frantic bark of nervous laughter. You are completely bluffing, Maya, he shouted aggressively, but he was visibly shaking. The FBI does not care about a local family dispute. This is not a family dispute, Liam, I corrected him sharply, my voice echoing in the large dining room. This is a massive, coordinated criminal enterprise. You are actively facing federal indictment for violating Title 18 United States Code Section 1343 for severe wire fraud. You violated Section 1344 for bank fraud. You are facing aggravated identity theft extortion and federal racketeering charges for your completely racist gentrification scam. And Marcus is an active co-conspirator who committed severe perjury and attempted to illegally sell my property across state lines. The federal government cares very much about millions of dollars in stolen charitable funds and massive tax evasion. Mama Geraldine let out a piercing shriek, clutching her designer pearl necklace as if it were suddenly strangling her. Marcus, do something, she wailed. Do not let her do this to us. Marcus stared at me, his eyes wide with absolute sheer terror. Maya, please, baby, he begged, falling to his knees right there on the expensive Persian rug. I am begging you. I will give you everything back. Just please do not call the authorities. I will go to prison. I will lose my professional license. Please. You already lost absolutely everything, Marcus. I replied, staring down at him with zero pity. And I do not need to call the authorities. I looked directly up at the hidden camera concealed perfectly inside the crystal chandelier. They are already conducting a full comprehensive audit. The safe word hung heavily in the air for a fraction of a second before the heavy mahogany front door of my Buckhead mansion was violently breached. The deafening sound of shattering wood and heavy tactical boots echoed instantly through the grand foyer. Federal agents wearing dark tactical gear, heavily armed and moving with absolute terrifying precision, swarmed into the formal dining room. Federal agents, stay exactly where you are, a loud, booming voice commanded. Special Agent Vance strode into the room, his federal badge prominently displayed on his belt. He looked around the chaotic dining room, taking in the forged real estate documents resting on the table and the terrified faces of my toxic in-laws. Liam tried to make a sudden, desperate run for the rear patio doors, but two massive federal agents tackled him forcefully to the hardwood floor. The sharp metallic click of heavy steel handcuffs snapping tightly around his wrists echoed loudly in the room. "You are making a massive mistake," Liam screamed, his face pressed aggressively against the floorboards. "I demand a lawyer right now. You are going to need a whole team of them, Liam." Agent Vance replied coldly. Marcus was still kneeling on the rug, completely frozen in shock, as an agent pulled his arms firmly behind his back and handcuffed him. He did not fight. He just stared at me, tears streaming down his face, a completely broken, pathetic man. Mama Geraldine was hyperventilating, sobbing uncontrollably, as a female agent gently but firmly escorted her out of the dining room, informing her of her Miranda rights regarding the embezzlement of the church funds. The young corrupt notary surrendered immediately, weeping loudly and eagerly, offering to testify against Liam in exchange for any possible leniency. In less than 10 minutes, the massive chaotic raid was completely over. The dining room was empty of my toxic family. Agent Vance walked over to me, picking up the stack of forged documents and the black pen from the table. "Excellent work, Maya," he said with a rare, genuine smile. "We have everything we need to ensure they never see the outside of a federal penitentiary." "Thank you, David," I replied, letting out a long, slow breath I felt like I had been holding for days. 6 months later, I sat comfortably on the rear patio of my beautifully restored Buckhead mansion. The warm Atlanta sun felt incredible against my skin. I rocked my perfectly healthy newborn daughter in my arms, listening to the soft rustling of the leaves in the lush garden. My smartphone rested on the patio table, displaying a breaking news article from a prominent local business journal. The headline read, "Former investment executive and prominent real estate broker sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for massive fraud ring." Mama Geraldine had accepted a severe plea deal, serving 5 years in a minimum security facility to completely avoid a much longer sentence. They had tried to completely break me. They thought my background as an abandoned foster child made me incredibly weak and entirely disposable. They severely underestimated the absolute strength it takes to build your own successful life from absolutely nothing. I looked down at the beautiful, peaceful face of my sleeping daughter. I had successfully protected our home, our financial future, and our peace. I did not just survive their incredible betrayal. I actively orchestrated their absolute downfall. I kissed the warm forehead of my baby girl, smiling brightly into the afternoon sun. We were finally free, and our real, beautiful life was truly just beginning. The most profound lesson from Maya's story is the incredible power of maintaining emotional composure and analytical clarity in the face of profound betrayal. When confronted with a meticulously orchestrated campaign of gaslighting, her toxic in-laws expected her to react with stereotypical hysteria. They weaponized her vulnerabilities, including her pregnancy and her foster care background, to force a desperate emotional collapse. However, Maya teaches us that our greatest defense against manipulation is the cold, hard truth. Instead of screaming, crying, or begging for validation from people committed to destroying her, she compartmentalized her grief. She transformed her pain into a razor-sharp focus, relying on data logic and undeniable evidence. Narcissists and manipulators absolutely thrive in the chaos of emotional reactions because they use your distress as proof to support their false narratives. By refusing to give them the explosive emotional reaction they desperately needed, Maya completely stripped them of their power. Her restraint was never a sign of weakness or submission. It was a highly calculated strategic advantage. We often feel pressured to loudly defend ourselves when our character is unjustly attacked or when we are betrayed by those closest to us. Yet this journey illustrates that we do not always need to engage in the immediate chaotic battle of angry words. True strength lies in recognizing your own absolute worth, quietly gathering your resources and allowing the indisputable truth to speak for itself when the time is perfectly right. You do not ever have to absorb the toxic projections of insecure people. Ultimately, the story reminds us that our boundaries and our self-respect are our ultimate sanctuary. The next time you face toxic manipulation or unjust attacks, take a deep breath, step back from the emotional chaos, and let the undeniable truth be your strongest shield.